Now we move on to the so-called rhetoric and conspiracy theory of emergence of U.S., Mexico, and Canada, known as the North American Union, also part of NAFTA and GATT. Now again, the government classifies this as rhetoric and conspiracy theory, and the following information you're about to see is going to change your mind.
The Bush administration's open borders policy and its decision to ignore the enforcement of this country's immigration laws is part of a broader agenda. President Bush signed a formal agreement that will end the United States as we know it, and he took the step without approval from either the U.S. Congress or the people of the United States. Bill Tucker reports.
The Security and Prosperity Partnership of North America sounds benign, hardly like a policy that critics call NAFTA on steroids. It's a deal that few have even heard of.
It's being done again by very few people at the very top on behalf of the investment class, but the working class of people. Political officials across our country, from communities, from cities and so forth, they don't know anything about this.
Yet it was agreed to by Mexico's President Fox, Canada's Prime Minister Martin, and President Bush in 2005. Administration officials counter their critics by saying everything about SPP is on the White House website. And they say the partnership is not a treaty, but more of an outline of priorities between the United States, Mexico, and Canada. Still, some wonder why there haven't been public discussions about the goals being pursued.
This SPP includes, for instance, a committee that is sitting down to harmonize our meat inspection and food safety. So how far away from a trade agreement can your dining room table and what you feed your kids be?
Other parts of the agreement mention border security as an issue, which include all of North America. In fact, the name of the agreement is not Security and Prosperity of the United States, but of North America.
When we elect officials, we expect them to act on our behalf. When we get involved in cooperative frameworks with other countries for joint regulation of fisheries or rail transportation or the skies, we're basically sharing our sovereignty with that government and outsourcing some of what we give our elected officials.
As disturbing as some find SPP, there is legislation in the House introduced by Florida's Catherine Harris that closely resembles the goals of the partnership. Included in that bill is a section which calls for the securing of Mexico's southern border by the United States and Canada. Lou, that's not the border with the United States, that's the border they share with Belize and Guatemala.
The idea that the White House would respond that this is on their website, this involves intricate workings amongst the Commerce Department of this country and Canada and Mexico's, of course. A regional prosperity and security program. This is absolute ignorance. And the fact that we reported this, we should point out, when it was signed. But as we watch this thing progress, these working groups are continuing, they're intensifying. What in the world are these people thinking about?
Well, they say, look, these are a declaration and an outline of our priorities. And when I called them today, Lou, they said I was the first phone call they had received literally since the deal was first signed. So people are not paying attention, and they're letting them, in fact, get away with this.
You know, I was asked the other day about whether or not I really thought the American people had the stomach to stand up and stop this nonsense, this direction from a group of elites in absolute contravention of our law, of our Constitution, every national value. And I hope, I pray that I'm right when I said yes, that this is beyond belief. Bill Tucker, thank you very much.
We also have to highlight, as the Miac report does, that they say a new currency for this North American Union called the Amero is also a conspiracy theory.
Dollar drop. We're coming into a cyclical bottom for gold, and it rises going into December, January, so that might be the reverse of the dollar fall. Apart from that, I think one thing people who are dollar-based need to focus on is the Amero. That's the one thing that nobody's talking about, but I think it's going to have a big impact on everybody's life in Canada, the U.S., and Mexico. If you Google it, you'll find out all about it.
Well, you could tell us a little bit more right now.
You always hear it on CNBC, don't you? The Amero is the proposed new currency for the North American community, which is being developed right now between Canada, the U.S., and Mexico to make a borderless community, much like the EU, and the dollar, Canadian dollar, U.S. dollar, and the Mexican peso replaced by the Amero.
You really think that will get any leeway?
You may want to visit a couple of websites and see how far along it is. The Canadians are pretty upset about it, whereas the Americans, apart from the Texans, are the only people who know anything about it. The rest of the public's really sort of with their head in the sand on this one.
Okay, interesting. I mean, we've already got NAFTA, the free trade zone, isn't? I mean, is that working? Is that doing enough?
Well, I'll tell you what, it's created a lot of illegal immigrants coming across the border. I don't know. You get the pros and cons on this thing. NAFTA, for some people, is a very good thing. For other people, it's been a disaster. And I think this is one way that the politicians are trying to work themselves out of what potentially could be a disastrous situation going forward.
And this is why the U.S. government is running scared, because, yes, there are patriotic groups here and militia groups rising up. And as you can see, they have in store for plans for us for a North American Union, ultimately to a new world order, one world government. In this next section, highlighted Universal Service Program, they talk about Obama stating that we need a national security force that's just as powerful, just as strong as the military. And they claimed this to be rhetoric and conspiracy theory. And the following you're going to see is Obama himself stating we need a security force that's just as powerful, just as strong as the military. Then you're going to see an article following this video about the Boy Scouts being trained to go after returning veterans in domestic terrorism.
We cannot continue to rely only on our military in order to achieve the national security objectives that we've set. We've got to have a civilian national security force that's just as powerful, just as strong, just as well funded.
And as you just witnessed, Obama declaring that we need a national security force, and also training Boy Scouts and groups like City Year to go after returning disgruntled veterans and domestic terrorists. And this is Obama's youth brigade, just like Adolf Hitler had in the 1930s. In this section of the Miac report, they highlight the radio frequency identification device known as a RFID, and they state, there is a fear that the government will enforce mass RFID human implementations. This process will make it possible for the government to continually know the locations of all citizens. Now, claiming this to be a conspiracy theory and rhetoric, we have legislation and documents in the commercial stating, yes, this RFID chip is real. The global government's plan is to put a chip into every human being on the face of the earth. And right here in Obamacare, as you're going to see, that the RFID chip is going to be mandatory. Here we have HR 3200, early version of Obamacare. Now, pages 1001 and 1008 talks about a medical device implant. Now we move on to HR 3962, where again it speaks about this medical device implant, about storing data files and so on, and this is going to be passed off as a medical device implant. As that goal is by 2013 is to plant all American citizens with health care with this RFID chip, and it's going to be passed as a medical device implant. NBCnews.com reports that the FDA, known as the Food and Drug Administration, approved of this computer chip implant for humans. Now, the following video you're going to see is a propaganda commercial to promote this RFID chip as this miracle device to save humanity, this miracle implant device that's going to revolutionize the medical industry.
To think something so small can connect you to everything that matters.
When your life and all you love
are on the line.
HealthLink is always with you when every second counts in the emergency room, providing immediate access to your medical records.
Because Bob has trouble remembering all his medications.
Because I'm in love with my kids' kids.
Because my car lost control while driving.
Because now I'm looking out for both of us.
Because I have diabetes, but it doesn't have me.
Because I spend my life in the ER trying to save yours.
Once again, the federal government classifies this as a conspiracy theory when you've just seen it in legislation, news articles, and propaganda videos. Now you have hospitals and insurance companies offering this chip already, from Digital Angel, from Halo, and made from Verichip Corporation. Now here you have the federal government demonizing Christians, saying that the religious ideology is popular in extreme right-wing circles. In other words, anybody who's religious is a terrorist. Now you have the government stating that militant abortion, such as anti-abortionists, have been known to take up arms in support of their beliefs. And now they bring up a guy named Eric Rudolph, who was responsible for the Atlanta Olympic Park bombing and abortion clinics, was an anti-abortionist. Now they automatically demonize all anti-abortionists as terrorists. Now in this section is here where the U.S. government classifies as anti-IRS people terrorists, as a state and tax resistors. This movement is strongly opposed to the collection of federal income tax. Individuals in this movement generally believe that the income taxes are invalid and the tax laws do not apply to them. So anybody who opposes the Federal Reserve and the IRS system, you are a terrorist. Now we have the U.S. government stating that anybody who is against immigration is a terrorist. And in the section anti-immigration, they say some militia organizations have been formed solely for the purpose of countering the threat of illegal immigration. Extremists will argue that the immigrants are taking the jobs of U.S. citizens during the times of high unemployment, which is true. Additionally, illegal immigrants are seen as sucking up government resources without paying taxes, and this is on record. And some militia units patrol the border in order to safeguard against drug smugglers, gangs, and violent immigrants. Well, you know what? The ATF ain't doing their job, so we have to do it. And this is what they call, folks, terrorists. This is terrorism when you want to defend your home country. And here you have the U.S. government stating how to look for a terrorist by the political paraphernalia, such as militia members most commonly associated with third-party political groups. And it is not uncommon for the militia members to display Constitution Party flags, Campaign for Liberty, or libertarian material. These members are usually supporters of former president candidates Ron Paul, Chuck Baldwin, and Bob Barr. Now here we have the government stating this is anti-government propaganda, and potential terrorists called militia members commonly display pictures, cartoons, bumper stickers, and contain anti-government rhetoric. Most of the material will depict the FRS, IRS, FBI, ATF, CIA, UN, law enforcement, and the New World Order in a derogatory manner. Additionally, racial, anti-immigration, anti-abortion material may be displayed by militia members. So automatically, if you have any of this, you could be a terrorist. And finally, these are the symbols called the militia symbols given by the Miac report to law enforcement officials to spot potential terrorists, such as having any of these as flags and bumper stickers and so on. And finally, we move on to the last page of the Miac report, where they demonize any book or any video that exposes the New World Order, such as exposing the Federal Reserve System, exposing the income tax fraud, and also how they say that the Turner Diaries were the reason and the motivation behind Timothy McVeigh to bomb the Oklahoma City building. This is just one of many documents from the United States government classifying anybody who is a Ron Paul supporter, somebody who opposes the New World Order, somebody who stands for gun rights, somebody who is against abortions. Basically, anybody who is a free American citizen, anybody who believes in liberty and freedom is a terrorist. We encourage you to get this information out to friends, family, and neighbors who are military or law enforcement, because our country, our Constitution, and everything America stands for is under threat. And remember, you are the resistance.
Ask yourselves, what are you doing in this time of great challenge? What are you doing to unlock minds?